Welcome to another episode of Gators Gameday Live, a hurricane storm edition here. I'm Seth Varnador, joined by Bud Davis, and it's Florida's bye week, which came at a pretty good time, I think, with all kind of the upheaval from the storm and all that. So it seems like Gainesville may get some impact later tonight, but we'll see. So Florida's got a bye week, so it's a good time to look back at what's happened so far this year, and then we can do a little bit of looking forward, because it certainly seems like since we talked last that some things it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when for some certain things. So we can talk through those as well. But Bud, just general impressions going into the bye week of the Florida Gators football team this year.
I think pretty disappointed. I think the defensive line, especially, that was like heading into the season somewhere I wasn't that worried about. And I think it's just become a huge issue. And that's really disappointing. I think, going out and getting a good linebacker like Pup Howard was pretty optimistic. And I liked a lot of our portal DBs as well. And just nothing Pup's been great. We'll talk about this a little bit with the defense, but it's crazy that we have a pretty competent linebacker core and a lockdown corner, and our defense is as bad as it is. And how many years in a row have we watched terrible defense? And we'll get to some of that. I don't think Mertz has quite looked as good as I expected. I think the transfer receivers have been great. I think the O-line, which was a concern heading into the year, has been continued concern, and now we're about to head into a pretty tough part of our schedule. So I think would have been good to come out of win one of Miami and Texas A&M. So it's we're about one less than I thought we'd be.
Yeah, and Tennessee looks a lot further away from a toss-up than I think some people thought in the offseason. They're looking pretty good. So yeah, it would have been nice to get one of those two early ones. But it's kind of, it's not this. I guess you can't say a lot of this is too surprising, right? Because we've talked in the past about roster construction and how do you build your lines of scrimmage, and it's not really through the portal, right? So the fact that Florida had to go in the portal for both lines of scrimmage, the portal additions there have not really impressed, I don't think. But the other positions where you can find value in the portal, receiver, linebacker, you've had some guys come in and make plays. So it shouldn't be super surprising, but I think there were some, PFF grades were in people's eyes this summer and made them feel a little bit more positive. But let's start looking at the offense. I think, at the first week, at the Miami game, I felt like I was more disappointed in the offense than the defense. That may have changed since then, but I still thought they'd be a little bit better early in the year. Like you said, Mertz is that first game was probably his worst game as a Gator, possibly. He was pretty sharp against Mississippi State, but this is there's some context to look at these numbers at. Like when you sent these over, it was like, Mississippi State really helped bump a lot of these up. So you've played really two terrible defenses. You played two really good ones too, but I think the two terrible. It's just I think you're pretty good on offense. You're good, above average. So when you play bad defenses, you can produce really well. But they have struggled against those good defenses, and you can see here. Anything stick out to you? I mean, to me, the one number that kind of jumps out is the 12 personnel in terms of success rate and EPA per play. That's and they're using it more relatively 10 percentage points more relatively than others. So that's kind of something that sticks out to me. Anything else kind of stick out to you or match kind of your expectations coming into the season?
So being able to go 12 and have success, I think Florida's doing pretty well there. And it's not like, we've had a ton of breakout there. I think Hansen has been, a little bit more impressive than Boardingham. So it's been nice to see him. But generally, you kind of look at our splits, our run pass splits are about where you'd expect. Some of our efficiency numbers a little bit on the positive side, 73% and 50% on pass attempts and designed runs. You can feel pretty good about that. Sacks and scrambles actually right in line with FBS average. So we're not getting quite as killed on that as we were maybe last year. But, we're not generating positive EPA on our designed runs, not getting that much on our passes. So, we're an okay to average offense, and I think that's generally what we've seen.
Yeah, looking at, there hasn't been a ton of them, but there's been a few DJ Lagway design runs that, like converted a third and long against Mississippi State. But like you said, looking at the running back design runs, still being negative EPA on the season for a team that wants to make that, being able to run the football, I think a big part of their identity is interesting. Also, kind of another one that jumps out is I feel like the last year the inside run numbers were much higher than the outside run. So it seems like that's gone a little bit different this year, where they're running outside a little bit more, and they're having some success there running the ball.
Yeah, a little bit higher success rate, definitely higher EPA per play. We haven't really busted many big runs from the inside. I think most of our explosives have gone to the outside. Generally just negative EPA on running back designed runs. That's pretty tough in this offense. And we've talked about this before is, we don't hate this scheme. It's not like, oh, this is a stupid high school scheme that will never work. This is a, pretty sound scheme, but it relies on having that wide zone run game to set up a lot of the, passing off of that. And it's hard to have a punch counter punch offense if the punch isn't working. And it makes it pretty tough. We're doing okay generating the explosive plays on offense. And I think that's a lot to do with having an experienced QB, having a pretty good wide receiver core, and then also having a guy like Lagway come in. So offense, I'm not disappointed. I think I do wish we were seeing a little bit more from Mertz. I thought we'd see him kind of take a step forward. And then it stinks to see the offensive line kind of play out how we worried it might, where we're going to the portal to replace some guys we haven't recruited well, and it doesn't work out. We thought this might happen, and it did.
Well, I think even worse is you went to the portal to replace some guys, and now the guys you went to the portal to get are sitting on the bench more than replacing the guys you wanted them to replace. So, so you're not even getting kind of the benefit of them playing and being a small upgrade. So, yeah, and that's kind of I think that's my main issue, and we'll talk about Billy Napier's future towards the end. But, a lot of people jump on the scheme. Like you said, the scheme it's not my favorite, but it's solid. But you got to recruit to it. Like if you recruited really well on the offensive line, this scheme would look much better.
Yeah.
It's not too dissimilar. Now the play calling is not as good, but it's not too dissimilar in function and what they're trying to do. It's not too dissimilar to Texas. But Sark is a really good play caller and a little more creative. But a lot of the stuff, kind of the setup, the punch, counter punch that they like to do using motion and things like that, they're much better at RPO and a little more creative. And I think Sark is, I don't think it's going out on a limb to say he's a much better play caller in terms of timing and sequencing. But that's what you want to do. Now, Texas has gone out and spent money on the offensive line. They've recruited really well there.
Yeah.
And you see they're kind of bearing the fruit of that now. So that's my biggest contention with the offense is that it's year 3. If this is the system you want to run, you haven't recruited well enough to run this system. So either the system's got to change or you need to recruit a lot better. So
yeah,
that's kind of where I sit with the offense. The scheme is what it is, but it could be successful if you recruited well, but they just haven't.
I think the most interesting thing we've seen on offense is a steady increase in tempo week to week.
Yes.
I think we ranked 15th last week in offensive tempo, which is pretty high. I don't think we've seen anything like that in the entire Napier era.
And I think there was one season at Louisiana, I believe he was a little bit higher tempo than he'd been in previous season. That was 2019 when they had their best year offensively at Louisiana. So, my question seeing that is, was there a thought that, okay, I have to protect my defense by not having them on the field as much, so I don't want to go as much tempo. And as we're about to show the defensive play calling sheet here, is it more of, hey, it doesn't matter what I do, these guys are not very good. So maybe you start going some tempo just to try to get more plays, get more chances at offense, more chances to score, and see if you can kind of win games that way. Because if you're trying to protect this defense, it hasn't really worked very well.
Yeah, and I think it could be that. I was also thinking, where you're alternating QBs, maybe it gives you a little bit more time to script some things, prep one before his next drive, so you feel a little bit more comfortable that you can go fast with them because you had some time to talk through it.
Yeah, and so let's move on to the defense that I think that possibly you've been trying to protect a little bit and play keep away, so they're not on the field as much. But unfortunately, they've gone out on the field quite a bit. So, Bud, what's the biggest? Walk us through this. Where's the biggest? There's not really even a trouble spot. It's just kind of the whole thing, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I mean, I think what immediately jumps out is anytime you see teams running on you more than passing, +9 designed runs, that means you're probably losing a lot. And teams are positive EPA in almost everything. And, even sacks and scrambles are borderline positive EPA. So QBs are scrambling. You're not generating hardly any sacks. You're basically getting smoked in most of these. Green is good, and there's not a ton of green on here. Maybe running back screens. We've been pretty good locking those up. But
you can't throw the running backs against the Gators.
Yeah, 45% success rate on deep targets is insanely bad. And then you see the 0.79 EPA per play. That is terrible. I mean, that's 1 in 5 pass attempts teams are throwing deep, and they're crushing us with it.
Yeah. And we talked before we came on, not being able to stop the run nor being able to stop deep passes does not seem like a great combination.
Yeah, it's really bad. And I think a lot of it comes back to, you see that MOFC, which is middle of the field close. So that's like your cover 1, cover 3. And cover 3 is a big part of how this defense, how our sims work, our creepers work. And 50% success rate there for opposing offenses, 0.38 expected points per play. That is really bad there for kind of one of your identities of your defense. A little bit better, those middle of the field open. So that's probably some of our cover 2 stuff. That's a little bit better. Maybe we do need to just send some guys deep and pray that having enough safeties back there, one of them makes the play on the ball. Inside runs, terrible. 51% success rate when teams run up the middle. That is really bad for inside runs. Our blitz, maybe you're thinking like, oh, well, why don't we blitz more? We're not getting any pressure. When we blitzed, we've been getting smoked. 53% success rate, 0.65 EPA per play. So, I mean, you run 2 blitzes and you lose a point. It's pretty brutal right now. It does feel like that too.
Yeah, no, it's not been a fun watch to watch the defense. Even against Mississippi State, at times there were struggles. I felt like they were a little bit more cleaned up. Really interested to see what they look like coming out of the open week because, Napier, I think he was quoted saying it's not really schematic. It's more about alignment, assignment, doing your job type stuff, which I think in some instances, like schematically, throwing a seam down or throwing a guy right down the middle of the field against single high cover 3 safety, schematically on the board, that looks like a great call. You're running the guy right to the safety. The corner's kind of playing outside his deep third and kind of close on that as well.
Yeah.
Schematically, it's not bad. Now, if your middle of the field safety runs to the outside third and leaves the middle of the field wide open, assignment wise, that's not too good. And that's kind of what that touchdown against Texas A&M was. That we talked last week. You weren't on, you were traveling, but we talked about how bad the cover 3 had been. I thought we saw them a little bit more too high against Mississippi State at times. And maybe that'll be an adjustment going forward, playing some more too high looks. You can play a lot of different things out of too high, and you can play too high where you can still stop the run effectively. And they have ways to do that. But, man, that's just the middle of the field close stuff is supposed to be their base, and it's their two the information you shared last week, their two highest run coverages were cover 3 and cover 1, both middle of the field closed, and they're just terrible at it, which is bizarre.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I think the no blitz numbers look okay. You can look at that. We're in negative EPA there. So maybe this defense, it's kind of weird to say because they haven't been very aggressive, but maybe they need to be even less aggressive because it's been so bad. I don't know, man. This is one you can say it's not scheme, and I get that.
I think there's got to be
like these guys do not look well coached. We're doing spot drop cover 3 and blowing assignments, and I think guys have clearly regressed, and I don't know how you call it. I don't know how you fix it at this point. I don't know if the defense can be fixed or what.
Yeah, and when I say scheme, I'm not thinking in the totality of coaching. Scheme is just kind of, all right, what's the play call? How are we trying to match up? There's a lot of coaching failures outside of that. Like you said, if we are truly running a spot drop cover 3 and my safety leaves the middle of the field, like that is really elementary. Like everybody runs cover 3. Like teams in Pop Warner run cover 3. Like every level of football can run cover 3 and do it pretty effectively at times. So whatever the communication is, maybe there's a ton of rules and it's too complex and you just need to simplify it and let guys go play. I don't know. There's something, and these things can get very complex, even though it ends up looking like a spot drop. I'm just dropping the grass coverage. There's a ton of different rules. Yeah. They have like curl, flat, wheel rules. So, there's like Douglas probably should have carried the wheel, even though he probably has a curl flat responsibility. But then if the wheel comes, he's got to carry it. There's all kinds of things like that. Maybe they can simplify it. But UCF's coming to town next week. They love to run the football. So some of these numbers against the run aren't super encouraging when you look at it.
Yeah, not at all. And, I think people can throw out different ideas for how you fix it. Maybe we need to do this or do that. But pretty much any way we've split the stats, it all comes out looking bad. I think there's been talk, maybe we run more even versus for odd. They're both bad. You can look at the numbers. It really doesn't matter what front we're in. We're going to play pretty bad. The personnel who are out there, it's not changing it that much. But it's wild to have. We have 2 good linebackers and a shutdown corner, and we can't play defense. And I think a lot of that, comes back to not having the D-line and not having the safeties. And if you don't have the D-line that can, generate pressure, 2 of our best D-linemen went to the portal and are playing for other SEC schools, having great years. Yeah. And your safeties are failing on the back end, every other throw. You're not going to win many games. So
no. And I think, you did try to go to the portal to fix some of the safety issues. Asa Turner got hurt in the Miami game, I believe. I'm not sure when he'll be back. I think Bridges has played well when he's gotten in. Now he did get the butt targeting against Texas A&M that took him out. So maybe he's had some bad luck, but I feel like he's played pretty well when he's played. And there are other guys at times it looks like guys are covering pretty well. There's flashes of competence, but the safety room has been put in some tough spots and not been able to make plays. And if they can clean that up, maybe simplify things, clean it up for them, make it easier. Because some of these guys were still, I think recruiting ranking is a lot about your physical capabilities. So a lot of these guys have the physical capabilities to play. Yeah. They just got to figure out the best way to take advantage of that. So, like you said, it's not a simple fix. All right, well, go more odd front. Well, odd front's not been very good. All right, go more even front. It's been about just as bad. You got some numbers that's pretty much the same. So it's not going to be an easy fix. Maybe simplification. But I don't know. We'll see. that it is going to be interesting to see kind of what's the plan going for. What's the plan at UCF? They play Colorado tomorrow. That'll be probably an interesting one to watch in terms of how does Colorado play their run game. But Florida needs to be ready for that because they have a sold out crowd coming in to Gainesville next week.
Yeah. So, all right. How's the film look? What is? I mean, it looks bad on paper with the numbers. I can't imagine the film is much better.
No, it hasn't been much better. I think there's some good stuff. There was a couple of things I did like in the Mississippi State game. I'll pull a couple in terms of just like since we were pretty negative, let's be a little bit positive here. Let's talk about some good stuff because one thing, especially in that the Miami game earlier in the year, it was kind of like, where's the man coverage? Where's the stuff? It's where's the man beaters? Those kind of things. So I thought this was a pretty well done concept down in the goal line here. So you start in a bunch. So Mizell starts here. You motion across. You get the man confirmation here. And now you got man coverage here, man coverage here. I don't know if this was a tell that okay, when we motion out of the bunch, they're going to bring this guy off the back. But since you have man here and the guy covering Boardingham's inside, you just kind of run through his outside shoulder and get vertical and just use that as a pick for Boardingham. And now he's got to run through it and you just get a guy wide open. So I thought that was a nice little wrinkle, something we hadn't really seen. So there was some good stuff. Nice little schematic wrinkle there. This was good to see as well. Just a pump and go for a touchdown. But and a throw to the left.
Yeah, we don't get many of those.
25-yard throw to the left there on target. And then this was a nice little one here. So you end up going hitch, seam, hitch, like almost like slot fade here, and then down the seam there with the tight end. So basically hitch seam, the safety kind of shades the two receiver side or the field a little bit more, where it's kind of looks him off, comes back, get Hansen up, which he's been a pleasant surprise this year, I think, in the passing game. So
yeah, we talked to some guys at StatsBomb. His speed numbers are pretty impressive.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, he's huge, but he's actually pretty fast too. He's a weapon. I've liked him this year.
Yeah, so there was some good stuff. I thought there was some good stuff in the running game. It's funny. What do you think? I'll turn this off for a second. Where do you think Montrell is kind of on the backs in terms of getting a chance to watch all the backs play? Is Montrell, where does he kind of rank for you? I think he's still probably your best one, but the young backs are playing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, nobody is going to, the young guys have higher yards per carry, but they're all going to regress. And it's just where are they going to regress to? Montrell's sitting 4.9 right now, negative EPA rusher, really low success rate. Webb's about the same yards per rush, better success rate. And then Jackson and Ball, higher yards per rush. Ball's still in the tank on EPA because you fumble that close to the goal line. Yeah. That's a huge EPA hole to dig out of. But their success rate's way up. So it's just it's tough because what you've seen from Ball and Jackson. They're not going to play that way their whole career. But it's as they regress to the mean, are they going to be higher than where Johnson is? And I don't know where that is. We like Johnson okay. Pretty good pass pro. You see a lot more stuff like when we get the all 22. I think you've said this before. You're really impressed by how he sees things. And
last year, the more I watched the all 22 last year, the more I was kind of impressed with how he ran. Now he's still not like crazy explosive, even though he did that great run against Miami. So he has some of it there, but yeah, the all 22, he's really makes a ton of like little subtle movements that it's hard to see on the TV copy. But that injury. I do feel like you've got a bunch of backs playing really. That's kind of the tough thing. You watch this team, you're like, they got a lot of pretty good backs. They got some pretty good receivers. You feel like you got two pretty good quarterbacks. I feel pretty decent about the tight ends. Just like, man, when you get beat up front, none of that matters.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I mean, there's a reason. We've talked about this before. You run the numbers. Where does it matter most to have elite dudes? And it's offensive tackle pops up. It's hard to do any analysis in college football and not have offensive tackle pop up as the most important position. And we've got one average one and several bad ones.
Yeah. I do think some of the younger backs are a little more explosive, and that may help with when the line's not playing well. And this was a nice little wrinkle here. So you're going like power read, but with the jet. So you're down blocking here. He's probably double teaming back to here.
The wide receiver blocking on this is they kill their DK. Yes. DK and Mizell just destroy their guys.
And now he's pulling. I would imagine he's probably pulling for him, and they're reading him. He squeezes down. So now here. So you're here, and there. So this is a nice wrinkle off of, you can get some quarterback run game. And that's something I wasn't sure how much they do with Lagway, but this is, I'm not sure if they may call this one, hey, you're giving it. Or I'm not sure if they tell him he could read it, but theoretically you could be reading him. I'm working in here. He widens with the jet. Now you keep it up in there.
We know this stuff is in the playbook from Louisiana. Like we've seen it there. God, look at Mizell. Mizell's almost got the pancake in the end zone.
Yeah, which, I think you'd be like, well, why isn't he playing more? Well, maybe he's not a great blocker downfield. Well, that looked pretty good. So
yeah,
hopefully we get to see a lot more of him. And we were kind of joking, like not seeing as much of Mizell through the first part of the season is almost a fireable offense in and of itself. After a couple of some of the runs after catch he made.
He's been really good, and the team is not that far off, but it's really, they're so bad on defense. It's tough to win games.
And it feels like people just have their number, man. Like, watch this one here. So you're going to show here and then drop out here, and he's going to blitz, and then you just, I don't know, I don't think it's a hot route, but you just got somebody breaking right there. And if you're back, you got a little wide, you make it underneath it, but just kind of right where you left from. So and that's a pretty good ball, but again, like where's the safety here? Safety's a little bit late getting there. So you go a little too high safety stuff, and these do, but it would certainly seem like you've got eyes here. So you kind of should have him underneath and then him over the top, almost kind of clamping this thing down. And you see the underneath guy does a pretty good job. The safety just is not there to kind of squeeze down on it. That's a really well thrown ball still.
Yeah, that's a great throw. It's tough. I mean, he's sitting back in the pocket. He's got all day. He's got a great platform to throw that ball on too.
That's helpful too. But I feel like the safety could just clamp down on that a little bit quicker. But these are the kind of things that just got to get cleaned up. And the problem is you don't play a lot of teams like Mississippi State the rest of the year. This was a bad one. I think this was one a lot of people have been upset with. You're talking about the film. Safety's coming to fill. Like, just looks kind of awkward there, but so it's the defense was still pretty bad. I don't know. This is a good question from Guthrie here. I don't know, man. Like, I think there might have been more in the Mississippi. I would have said there's Guthrie has any insight why we do the hockey style substitutions all game. I think if it was just a Mississippi State game, you would have said, it's the tempo. But we've seen where it seemed like drive to drive. They're just bringing in a bunch of new bodies.
I think I got the answer. It's because we don't have that many elite dudes. We have a lot of guys who are fine, who are pretty average, and there's a lot of other guys who are just as good as them.
Just
So
replacement level.
yeah, everybody's yeah.
I feel like Caleb Banks will come in and flash, and then it feels like you don't see him for 2 drives. There's just some like stuff like that to me is kind of like he's a young player. Maybe he needs more game reps or something. I don't know, but that's I don't know. Could be. I think that's not a unlikely answer that these guys are all kind of replaceable. It's just,
and we've seen them go really high snap counts on guys before who are elite, like Dexter. His snap counts got absurd. And I just don't think we have many guys that it's like, oh, you got to keep them on the field. So,
fresh guy is better than tired. Fresh number 2 is better than tired number 1.
And I think we're just making so many mistakes. He's made a few mistakes. Get him out of there. Get this other guy in. Give him a shot. Oh, he's made a few mistakes. So back out.
It's not been great. They need to find something, obviously. Something to hang their hat on defensively, because right now they're still just searching. It's not, and like you said, there's some decent pieces. Like Jason Marshall's having a really good year in coverage, but you have a really good corner. You have 2 linebackers I think you feel pretty good about. Now, even those guys are getting rotated out. It's kind of where I think is to Guthrie's point about you're seeing drives where you don't have Pup Howard on the field, you don't have Shamar James on the field. You're getting other guys rotated in. Those guys are playing okay, but it's still like, why not roll with those guys for a long time? But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where they go from here. So what to this date, we kind of know what's wrong. Anything jump out as like a change, on either side of the ball? Offensively, I think you just got to know your protection's probably not going to hold up against anybody good. So you really got to get the ball out quicker, less shots. I think you can throw the ball on people. You got pretty good receivers.
I like the tempo.
Yeah, a little tempo might help, but defensively, I don't know.
Defensively, I have no clue what you do at this point. I mean, you're not generating any pressure. Part of me is just like, screw it. Let's play guys deep. Try not to make them kill us by paper cuts. Let's short. These games are already super short this year. Let's try.
I think that's what I tried to do into Miami, but the problem is you let up, like, you play the back end plays so deep, and then the linebackers don't play deep enough, and you just leave these gigantic gaps for still.
Yeah,
you're playing so deep, you're still giving up explosive plays.
It's tough, like when stuff is so broken like this, and there's just nothing I feel good on the defensive side. Like, oh well, we should do that, or we could do that, and that would fix it.
I think the fan thought would be, hey, let's just be really aggressive and blitz and play a ton of man coverage, and if we're gonna get beat, we're gonna get beat. But
maybe
you're Todd Orlando style, baby. It works for Todd Orlando style. Can work for a little bit.
All right, so let's think about it. So how you do it is you marshal on their best receiver, and then safeties. You got what? Everybody else gets double coverage.
What old Bill Belichick used to do was put the best guy put your best corner on the second best receiver, and then double the best guy.
I like that. All right,
that's kind of interesting.
We're figuring it out.
Yeah, so there you go. Who's got 3 really good receivers? I mean, come on. So there you go, and then bring a lot of pressure. And
then the inside runs. Good luck.
Just bring pressure into the inside gaps, and hopefully somebody makes a play. But defense is tough to fix if you're just like not great up front. And I think this defense puts a big emphasis on safety play too. So when your safeties aren't playing real well, that makes it really hard. Like Star is, I guess you can kind of group Star with nickel, but it's some of those guys play both Star and safety. It's that's a really important position. I think safety, with how much they move and change coverage, that's important. Rocking down.
Maybe a little more Bridges and Gates. I'm gonna be honest. I've seen enough Castell that I don't think this season's salvageable.
I wonder. It's some of these guys are like, man, I thought they played really well early on as freshmen, then hit the freshman wall, and it seems like some of them haven't been able to get up since the freshman wall. So hopefully that's something that could be cleared up a little bit. But yeah, it's not great. And because it's not great, we can start talking. I think since we last talked, it seems definitely that Florida's moving on at some point from Billy Napier. I don't think there's, outside of a miraculous run here where they finish out the regular season 10-2, I don't think it's salvageable for him at this point. So, where do you think, where does Florida go here if they move on from Napier? I think there's one kind of obvious choice that seems so obvious that everyone's kind of almost in unison on it. But
yeah. All right, so let's talk. Florida's probably, we're going to fire Billy Napier at some point this season. It's just
possibly within the next 2 weeks, depending on how some games go, I think.
And so I think the first most important thing is Florida needs to get a GM in, because the timing of recruitment now and the timing of the college playoffs really put teams that are doing coaching transitions in a brutal spot where you've got early signing day, you've got the winter transfer portal. Those are the two big ones that you need somebody managing your roster in there who is not just some interim lame duck on your staff. So Florida needs to hire a GM to do that. So we got to fire Billy Napier and hire a GM. That's got to get done.
I think also just not just kind of external recruiting, but in terms of retention, understanding who should be a priority to retain for a new coach.
You want to save like 10 guys from this roster, maybe.
I think that's really important, that when the new coach comes in, you have somebody with a outside set of eyes that's been able to watch practice closely, watch games closely, get access to all the data, all the film, and be like, hey, these are your guys that'll be NFL guys. These are guys that are worth keeping as projects.
Yeah,
these are all the dudes you can cycle out. Like it's up to you, but these guys are not, can't play at this level.
Yeah, and kind of figure out your NIL, what it's going to look like next year. What's your budget to play with in the portal? What's your budget for high school recruiting? That kind of thing. Somebody needs to start being the grown up in the room before we bring in a new head coach. Just with how the timing is, you've got to have somebody there. And then I put out my list of head coaches. And
while you look for that, here's a question to ponder.
Okay.
Does Florida gain anything by actually firing Billy Napier early?
I don't think so.
Because as soon as you fire your coach, you open yourself up to the 30-day transfer portal window, right? That's still a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but it doesn't. It won't really matter during the season.
It'll allow your players to get contacted, though.
Yeah,
which I'm sure they are already, but I think you'd like to be able to have your new coach or somebody new in charge be able to kind of ward that off a little bit.
Yeah, having a GM in place would be good. But yeah, I don't see a huge benefit other than galvanizing the fan base, firing coach. And he's done a bad job. And at some point you can only have so many losses in a row with the same head coach.
Yes. But I do feel
all right, should we do the list?
Yeah, let's do the list.
All right, so my list is Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin is one of the few dudes that the data guys, the film guys, and the vibe guys all agree are a good fit for Florida.
Yeah.
And we there's a lot of things. He's clearly elevated Ole Miss. He has a great offense, and that's part of Florida's identity is passing and scoring points. He fits that. He's brash. We've had brash head coaches. They can fit here. Gives you a little bit of an edge. And I think the only real worry is recruiting. He's never recruited at a high level. I do think NIL, you could, if Florida got its act together, structure around that and have elite recruits playing under Lane Kiffin, and then the sky's the limit. He's a guy you can easily see winning a championship at Florida.
And I think The real positives I think with him, or not, there's obviously a lot of positives, but what sets him apart from other places and some other guys you see, obviously, being successful at Ole Miss, being successful in the SEC with a team that's had ebbs and flows, but they've been pretty consistent now. And also, his offense was kind of instantly successful when he came to Ole Miss with a roster that the year before wasn't very good. Got their head coach fired. So, you took a roster and immediately made them pretty good. I think Florida has the skill guys to fit what he wants to do very well. And so I think he could come and hit the ground running offensively. Obviously, Florida likes an offensive coach. I think that would probably be the number one priority, is having a guy, or maybe 1A, 1B, but having a guy offensive schematic success, or a guy that is, has success on offense running some type of up tempo, wide open scheme is very important at Florida. It just doesn't seem to work otherwise very well. And then I think he's among the leaders in wins and winning percentage at multiple schools. So it's not like he just took one spot, stayed there. He's been able to go to different places and have that success. I think he's one of the leading in terms of winning percentage at FAU and Ole Miss, which is his last two stops. I mean, you forget he's coached. He's almost been coaching so long, you forget he coached at Tennessee, coached in the NFL, so he understands that structure a little bit. Coached at USC. He's been on staffs that have recruited really well in the past, so I think he understands maybe what it takes. But the new professionalization of college football, I think, helps him as well, because there's some thought that, he's just Mullen 2.0. But I think if you could hire Mullen into a more professionalized structure where recruiting is not as important, I think Mullen would be a very good coach. So I think Lane seems to check every single box, and then personality-wise, I think he fits. People will love the sound bites about wearing the visor because Spurrier Award, all that kind of stuff would go over really well. So he definitely seems to be candidate number one.
I think it's a good time to mention there's no formula for this. There's no, he's got to check these boxes to be successful, or he's got to have this winning percentage, or recruit at this level, or above baseline. I've tried to do this. I've tried to figure out what the magic formula is for coaching success. There isn't one. Just because guys do good at one program, it's a coin flip if they're going to do good at the next. And that's true for basically recruiting. It's on field. It's everything. It's really hard to predict how a coach is going to perform. It's about so much more than just what they've done at a past at one school. It's how they're going to fit at your school. It's who they've played. It's who they're going to play. College football is weird. It's a small sample size. We don't get many of them for these guys. We get one recruiting class per year. So most coaches last 3 years at a program. So you get 3 data points. One of those is a transition class. There's only 12 games a year, so it's tough to build out those, and the schedules are super variable in quality. So I think it's okay to have uncertainty. I don't think any of us should get mad at, well, you said this guy's name and he didn't do this or that, so that's a bad one. You're wrong.
I think Napier is a perfect example of this, because at the time, most people thought it was a good hire. He seemed to be destined for a bigger job. I remember the first time hearing about him, people were, saying he's a mix of Dabo's culture with Saban's process, like a real, and unfortunately, I think the original sin of the Billy Napier era is that he got hired a year too early or a year too late. If you fire Dan Mullen a year later, once NIL is kind of established, transfer portal stuff's a little more established, Napier's had a chance to see it at Louisiana and digest it, come up with a plan, I think he's much better. The guy's a planner. He wants to I don't think he wants to go out on a limb with a lot of these processes. He wants to see some results first, see how it works, and then formulate his plan. So that's something that I think somebody with a little more foresight, and that this is where I think the Strickland stuff comes in. Somebody with a little more foresight could have seen that things were coming down the road here that were going to change college football a lot, and that you need to have somebody prepared for that. So I think that's kind of the biggest issue there. But that is something that kind of, that's really somewhat out of nowhere, a whole new kind of part of college football and part of the hiring process that people didn't really know much about. And so, pedigree wise, you feel like, okay, this guy's going to be successful. He's been a successful coach. Now you go back and there are some points you look at and be like, oh, that maybe should have been a red flag. But like you said, there's not really many perfect candidates, really any perfect candidates. So, like, you even coming back to Spurrier, he was fired from staffs, as a position. Like, he didn't have the perfect. Now he had some success, but and historic success at Duke, but he'd been fired as a position coach before, which he held on to against Bill Curry and ran up the score on him every time he could when they played Kentucky. But there are, no perfect candidates, right?
Yeah, and we've seen guys like, Urban coming from Utah, lower level program at the time, head coach. We've seen guys like Kirby jumping from a coordinator. We've seen internal hires like Dabo. There's a lot of ways to get to be a successful head coach in college football. Even Nick Saban jumping from, where was he before? Michigan State over to Louisiana, LSU. Like,
and he went like Toledo to
Toledo, that's what
coordinator
it was.
then defensive coordinator for the Browns.
Yeah,
and their staff got fired.
Yeah,
then he gets the Michigan State job. So it's never super easy to tell.
People should keep an open mind. I get loving Lane. He's my 1A too. I think there's really not any wrong answers other than Drinkwitz. Like, no. And Gruden, no. Like,
the Gruden stuff. Like, come on, man. Like his agent, it must be unbelievable.
But I really like, I think Franklin. Part of me thinks they're flying too close to the sun this year and it's going to ruin the whole thing. But I really think I could see James Franklin coming in here. I love his staff. Like, I think he could come in here and immediately, like, get the staff on the ground. He's got good processes. He's got a great staff, both sides of the ball, good recruiting. Phil Trotwine, like, offensive tackle recruiting back home at Florida. Like, the guy's doing it at Penn State. He could do it even better here. Like, I can sell myself on him building a roster and competing for an SEC title in 3-4 years. And there's not that many guys that I can squint my eyes and see that on. Bill O'Brien, Lincoln Riley, I don't think they're going to leave their schools. Freeman, kind of like a bad version of James Franklin to me. And then I think we get to your boy, Golish.
Yeah, man. I like names you mentioned. Freeman, I don't know. I thought if he had a really good year, he would have been like a really interesting candidate just in terms of, hey, would you like to make recruiting a lot easier for yourself? He's a defensive background. He was a really good defensive coordinator at Cincinnati. I saw somebody bring up Luke Fickell. It's like, no, if you're going to hire Luke Fickell, just hire Marcus Freeman. Like, what's the difference here? So, to me, one of the biggest, I think one of the most important things for this hire, and it's something we saw with Napier, is that you have to hire somebody that's recruiting these elite players already. You can't just start a new relationship with all these guys that have been recruited for 4 years by elite institutions, right? So I think Golish is just kind of on the outside of that. He was at Tennessee 2 years ago. Now they do go after, they're pretty aggressive and try to get elite players on visits. They go after a lot of kids in the Tampa Bay area that are 4-star high level kids. So, I mean, I like the guy a lot. I think he's really well put together. He's had to work his way up from a student coach at Ohio State. He coached with Matt Campbell, coached under Heupel. The scheme offensively would fit Florida's talent really well. I think the guy's really sharp, and they almost broke the record for G5 recruiting last year. Their class was a few points away from beating the Houston class that had Ed Oliver in it, who was a 5-star, which that helped that class out heavily at Houston. So
he's got an attitude. I think
he's
got
very confident.
Yeah, I think he's gonna have success. It's just feels like a little bit of an early dice roll to give.
I think it's a very hard sell to Florida. I think it's a very hard sell to Florida fans after hiring a G5 coach, going back to hire another G5 coach who, I think like 8 wins for them would be a great year at USF this year from where they've coming from. So, a guy that's like 14-13 or 14-12 in 2 years is probably not real exciting for Florida fans. Even though that team won 4 games the previous 3 years combined. I don't think he would be. I think he'd be a tough sell. I think he would do well just because he's got the scheme that I think would fit Florida really well. He recruits really well, and he understands it. And it's a real interesting comparison between him and Napier, right? Napier, I thought was really, and it was the first year of like some of this stuff getting really important, but he was really kind of slow in the build, right? His thought was, he wanted to see some of these guys, see him first. He didn't just roll the roster over, right? Golish in his first press conference, like one of the things he said at the time, and then you kind of saw it play out. He's like, we want to be, and I thought it was just platitudes at the time, but he said, we want to be as good as we can, as fast as we can. I was like, okay, whatever. But what does that mean? It means he brought in like 40 new scholarship players, totally turned over the roster, and understood and has said since that, hey, that first year has got to be a proof of concept to sell to recruits. You got to come out hot that first year. You can't just come out and flounder, because now it's going to set your recruiting back. So they had really good proof of concept to show to recruits. They recruited really well. And just the different, just kind of looking at those approaches against each other was a really interesting case study to see. I think Golish gets it. I don't know if Napier got it when he first came in.
Yeah, I don't know if he still gets it.
Maybe. And then
I mean, you look at our offensive tackle board
from
high school, and it's a disaster.
Yeah. Another name you mentioned was Bill O'Brien. Their offense has been pretty good this year. We see what he's done in the past. Like Bryce Young was a really good player in college, but just where he's at now, you see how good, obviously, he was with him in Alabama. And Deshaun Watson looked all world with him with the Texans. The guy obviously knows what he's doing. I think the interesting part of him is that in this new we're heading towards this new professionalization, he was a GM as well. Even though he didn't enjoy it, he was a GM in the NFL.
Yeah.
He understands roster construction. He traded away first-round picks to go get Laramie Tunsil. Like, he understands the importance of the, tackle. He had to live and breathe this stuff for a year or so in the NFL. So I think he would provide a lot of value there as well. Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting.
He wasn't a great GM, and I don't think I want him to be our GM.
No, I just think the experience of it, understanding, okay.
And he's one of the few guys who can call almost any other coach at both levels and be like, hey, you want to come coach with me at Florida? And he could I can see him putting together world-class staff here. And
he just asked the strength coach who left Florida for Boston.
Yeah, he had guys leaving Florida to go to Boston College. So, but he's one that I would love him to come here. I think he's actually a pretty easy sell. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the word is he's never leaving Boston. But he's a guy who's really high up on my list. He's like close to my number 2.
He's a really just his background. I think if you would have said a few years ago, it would have been like, I don't know. But the more you read up on him and kind of see where the college football is going, it's like this kind of experience would be really valuable for a head coach to have.
Yeah,
just understanding how rosters are built and things like that. So, he'd be an interesting name. I don't know, man. I think if you go beyond Lane, because Lane seems like such a slam dunk, it can get really thin really quick.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where I like Franklin, Bill O'Brien, like Riley. Like, I don't know how many of those guys are gettable. And then you're into, the Golish, the Brom.
Yeah, Brom. I'd take a long look at Jeff Brom.
Yeah.
Brom's another interesting. It's just, we'll see. He seems like he's going to have another pretty good year at Louisville this year, and he is a guy that can really scheme them up, which I know Florida fans like that a lot. Interesting offense is not too dissimilar in structure to what Florida does, but he's a much better in the passing game, and probably a little bit more creative, which we've said a few times about a few different other coaches. But his career record is a little scary, right? Even though he was at Purdue.
Got it graded a little bit on a curve.
Yeah, so that's kind of the no perfect candidate type thing. And is that his alma mater? Would you have to dump dump a bunch of money in there to get it. He seemed to understand the portal and NIL. They do a pretty decent job there at Louisville, I think. This is a name that I hate. What are your thoughts on Cliff Kingsbury? He's just never been a good head coach ever.
Yeah, who did I saw somebody tweet something like Cliff Kingsbury is the best looking guy who runs the worst version of the air raid.
Now, he seems like he's going to have a pretty good offense in Washington this year, so he might be a name. But like does Cliff Kingsbury seem like a guy that's now? I guess it would depend on what your structure is, but does Cliff seem like a guy that really wants to recruit against Kirby Smart? And I don't know if he's built for that SEC recruiting life. Then he
go look at his win losses with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, that is the other part. Like, you couldn't build a good team when you had maybe what some people consider the greatest quarterback of all time, and you could barely make a bowl game at Texas Tech. So that's concerning, I think. I don't know, man. That would not be real exciting for me. I think you can find guys that do that. You could find a guy like I'd rather hire G.J. Kinney than hire Cliff Kingsbury. He's head coach at Texas State.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather hire him than hire Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah.
He's been a head coach. He's been successful. I think he was at Incarnate Word before, but been successful. They throw the ball a ton. They run the air raid, but he's actually won games as a head coach. So
let's see. Signetti's another name people throw out there. I think he's a little bit too old. I do think he gets the portal because you look at the success he's having at Indiana, and then I think it's something ridiculous. He brought like 40 guys from JMU over with him. So he basically just took his really good team last year. He has all those guys just running it in different uniforms. So, I mean, that's cool. He's got Indiana looking great. Clearly gets the portal, has a good offense.
Yeah, he's just an older guy, right?
Yeah, a little bit older. I don't know if that same model of bring the JMU guys to Florida for fast success is going to work. It's going to work again next year.
Yeah. Well, they're Indiana guys now. You're bringing the Indiana guys over. So
Drinkwitz is another name people throw out there. He's a 500 coach who had one good year last year. I cannot believe how far over the skis they are for that guy.
Yeah, he's a good interview. So people like him. You could sell me on a defensive guy if you went out and got a really good offensive coordinator, like
more,
like if you want a little Florida flavor, go get Cade Bell from Pittsburgh. He's doing well. So you could sell me on some of the defensive guys if they came in. What do you think about Kleiman? Like, in terms of guys I think that's the hardest part with this job. There's guys that are solid. You'd say this guy's a really good football coach. Do you think it would work at Florida?
I think it's just you got to be able to squint your eyes a little bit and convince yourself yes or no. And there's a lot of guys I can do that for, and I have an open mind. Like, sure, let's do it. I think I could squint my eyes and get there. But
really good coach.
It's also a lot harder. It's a lot harder to do. And the truth is, the odds are not in our favor. The vast majority of these coaches fail and get fired after 3-4 years, especially at a program like Florida. And it's also really hard. Florida's expectations are very high, and we're going to start from really low. And people don't want to hear about a slow rebuild. And I get that, but this is going to be tough.
Yeah. Brian Dayball, he'll be available soon. Are they getting punked on? He's with the Giants. Or are they getting
I don't know. I don't think I can
waxed
squint my eyes that much.
Are they being waxed right now by the Cowboys? Are they playing tonight?
Yeah, just
swap him. That's not too bad. Just swap him in for Napier. Just come in after he gets fired immediately during the season. Just jump in there, Brian. Yeah, I don't know. I think after Lane, it becomes really kind of wild. So focus the search. Paid as he said, Rounders paid that man his money.
Yeah,
And just make it a little bit easier for some. Now, it's not guaranteed success, but I think it seems like the best fit. So, because after that, man, we're talking about Brian Daboll right now, so it could get wild.
I can't squint that much. It's tough,
Yeah.
There's fun to coaching searches, but when you fire a coach, it means you're in a really bad spot, and we are.
This does bring up my favorite out of the blue scenario is Ryan Day loses to Michigan again somehow and wants to pull a Calipari. Would you be happy with Ryan Day, or would it be this guy had everything he could need at Ohio State and couldn't win it?
Yeah, I'd take both of those guys.
Yeah, I'd take either one. So, big Michigan fans to finish out this year. Day was on campus at Florida at some time, wasn't he? As a GA or student assistant or something.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think so. I think there's some time.
I could see that.
He's asking, are we 100% sure Napier's getting? It certainly seems like, barring some, and that's the only reason we're talking about it, is it seems the tide has turned on him, so to speak, that no matter, unless they win out this season, like, it's very possible if he loses to UCF, it happens then. There's some people saying. So, I don't know. Ryan Day would be a coup, though, I think. He already recruits Florida better than everybody else in the state.
2005 GA.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, did not know that.
Bring him home like Tom Herman with Texas. Get him. Hope he still has his business cards. So
go look at Penn State's staff and just you're like, oh yeah, that could work here. Like, yeah, he hasn't won the big game, but shit, I'll take. He's being competitive in Jacksonville again at this point.
He's a missed field goal away from the national championship 2 years ago. I mean,
yeah.
Right, they missed that field goal against Georgia. They played that Georgia team really well, and they would have played TCU, and they would have waxed TCU just like Georgia did. So he wasn't too far off.
Yeah. Well, I think
there's not much more to talk about here. We're getting into the weeds, but
yeah, let's save the rest, and we'll talk about it when it happens. We'll talk about it as things progress. So things we want to see. Tempo, defense get better, hire a GM,
scheme around
a poor offensive line. Preview.
Yeah, we'll be back next week looking at UCF. Early spoiler: they like to run the football a lot. I think we can agree on one thing as we head out here. For the love of God, no John Gruden.
Yeah, not Gruden.
We'll be back. We'll be back next week. With another episode of Gators Gameday Live. Thank you for watching. Go Gators.
Go Gators.